and then ask for feedback, comments, corrections, and hopefully different opinions than mine. And then when we have gotten through that, I would go to the next part, rather than trying to run through the whole thing and then ask for comments at the end, which I think would be more difficult because there are different topics that we could discuss, different aspects of this issue of making a strategy for surviving in the social media world. And I think I would like to try and do it this way. Those of you who are replying seems to be okaying, whether you're okaying the fact that we're waiting for a couple of minutes or whether you're okaying the way we will try to run this, I do not know, but I will take it as a yes on both accounts.
No, I think we should start now, Johanni. It's already 4 minutes past. So welcome all of you, and nice to see you all. We've met some of you before, so welcome to this joint webinar with Distance and Nordinfo. And one of the members of Nordinfo, Johanni Larienko, is going to present and start a discussion on surviving social media. So, and through, as Johanni said, somewhere in the middle, we'll be starting the discussion. So probably we'll do most of it through the chat, but maybe we'll try out some microphones as well. So we haven't done that during the last few webinars, but we'll try, maybe. But so Johanni, the floor is yours, and I'll disappear.
Ooh. Hello, everybody. Hilde, I like your suggestion for a hashtag for Twitter. Please all use that when commenting, adding your ideas and so on to your Twitter feeds as well. So if you use hashtag SurviveSome, they will be connected and easily traceable. My name, as you heard, is Johanni Larienko. I work in Helsinki at the VSY, the Finnish Adult Education Association, which is an umbrella for non-formal adult education in Finland. You can see the web address to our association. We have some material on the web in English and Swedish, but obviously most of it is in Finnish. Within VSY, I have different tasks to do. One of them being an information officer for the European Association for the Education of Adults, EAEA, and you can see the web address on the screen there as well. Now, the EAEA has been working for a number of years improving its information services, and we are quite far behind when it comes to social media. And my presentation today, what I wanted to talk about when I suggested to bring this up as a topic, are largely based on experiences I've had when trying to develop a strategy and making a number of mistakes for the EAEA primarily, but also within projects, because we see now we are working in several European projects, and we see now that the project world is slowly waking up as well to trying to find new contact points or contact areas with beneficiaries, with the end users, with those who should be benefiting from the project. All of this comes through the Nordic Informal Network of Information Officer, which we have dubbed Nordinfo. We're a group of people from all the Nordic countries who meet twice a year and are trying to develop services for services that none of us can do ourselves on our own. So there was a survey from Norway targeting non-formal adult education in the Nordic countries, asking about the use of social media and the approach of social media. That is one example. And this webinar, which we're doing in collaboration with the distance network of NVL, is another one in which we are trying to find new ways of sharing our experiences, knowledges, but also gaining new insights and testing whether what I, as an information officer and an umbrella organization, think whether that has any relevance for people working in a school or working in a study association, working as a teacher, for instance. Fine, that's very shortly about the background. I will switch to the presentation, first pages. Let's see. Should be here. While I'm waiting for this to load, I can see that some of you are commenting, like Anna Nora, that you only have noise. I really don't know what to do about it at this point. I hope that it's not the case for all of you, that it's a temporary issue and that you will begin to hear. Otherwise, it will obviously be very difficult to follow. Because some of you have commented, and I can see in the chat screen that you can hear it all right. So I'm hoping it's not my microphone or the Adobe Connect system, but rather something in the transmission on the way to your final computers, or maybe even in your computers themselves. So let's go into the presentation. I was trying to think about what this is all about, and I have been running a couple of presentations and workshops for Finnish adult educators, non-formal adult educators, about how to deal with the new challenges. These people are both headmasters and teachers, educational planners, or marketing people, to the extent that there are marketing people in adult education institutions in Finland. So some of the experiences that I have met when I've talked to people and I've seen what they're doing and what they offer, one problem seems to me that many people are running rather blindly around, and it's because they just did it. They did not make a big plan. They did not sit down on a strategic seminar and think about why they should change or how they should change. It more kind of grew out of the new possibilities cropping up, or mass media giving a lot of attention, and also creative media, films, books, but mostly films, adding the layer, and TV shows to some extent, of social media as something very alluring, something that's the latest and the best and the most interesting trend. And after having grown up with the web and learned how to use web pages, and to some extent maybe also newer things like blogs and such, there seems to be a big readiness to jump on whatever seems rather new and exciting because it's new, and less because there is a strategic thinking about how this could be useful. It's not seldom I have met people who are eldsjälar. I translated that because I don't know if there is an English equivalent to it, as fire soul. It simply means somebody who's really burning for their thing. In this case, very often burning for new modes of communication, about technology, about the abilities or possibilities that what you can do now, which you could not do before. Very often these people are teachers, and they are trying new methods and innovative approaches to teaching. But it's not limited to teachers. I've also met headmasters, people in charge of schools, who have the same approach, that they want to be where it's at. They want to be where things are right now. And they are the agents of change, and they push forward. So if you are running blind because you just did it, because it was something that kind of grew and you didn't really plan it, or because you have a couple of fire souls, you easily will run into the wall. You will run into the wall because what you will get from this approach is unfortunately very often a patchwork of old stuff like the web pages, add new stuff. You try to add something onto it without really thinking what it is or why you should do it. You will run into the wall because of a sense of lack of direction. You're doing this without a greater purpose. And you're doing this without proper planning. You're caught up in it and you have your responsibilities. Very often I see that you do your things, you do your work you have to do, and then this is added on. This is something you have to do because you volunteered or you mentioned it at a meeting, stupid you, and said, shouldn't we and couldn't we, and somebody turns to you and says, yeah, that's fine, please do it. But you won't get any more resources, you won't get any more time, you just simply have to do it. From a strategic point of view, this is not all, because even if you have a plan, even if what I'm painting, the picture I'm painting is not true for your institution, it might be true that you are lacking a way to measure the success. So you might make a plan, you might think what you're doing, and have an idea and a direction, but you don't really know whether you achieved it or not. You don't really know whether all the time and energy and effort you spent is actually giving any dividends, regardless of what those dividends are. Sooner or later, that will become another wall for you, a wall that you didn't need to face had you worked a little bit differently. The patchwork. We added on, as I said, what was already there. We had our web pages, we had our presence, and we added some new aspect. Or we built with the tools that we had. We did not consider what we wanted to achieve, but we were given a platform. Let's say Facebook. And we said, okay, so what's Facebook? Oh, it's like this, right. We will do the pages according to what the rules of Facebook, rather than thinking, what do we want? What do we need? And how can we make technology work and the solutions work for us? So the patchwork is also very often that we work on the premises of the technology and the premises that somebody else has given us, rather than the starting point that we should begin looking at our own needs. The lack of directions often means that we added things by chance. Somebody told us about a fun application. We went to a seminar and we got inspired. Somebody in an email would give you the link to something and you say, okay, that's really fun and cool. And I have yet to meet somebody who would then actually sit down, evaluate the new technology or gadget or piece of equipment or piece of technology, compare it with the other similar services and say, this one is the best. Always when I see this, what happens, and this includes myself, I'm not any better than anybody else, I stumble upon something and I start using it without really considering the pros and cons and the other alternatives. And once you're stuck with something, it's kind of hard to get out of it, because you have invested time, perhaps, you have put maybe a number of, for instance, videos in a video service. It's not just like that to move it to some other video service because they are more socially interactive or they more fit your profile. So this is a big problem that I can see, which comes from a lack of direction. A lack of direction also comes when we go into production too quickly, when we do not think about the stages of production, the pre-planning, the idea stage, and I will talk about those a little bit later, and all the way towards the final product. We just basically jump straight in and start using the product, and 5 minutes later, in worst case scenario, we publish. And then it's there. Now, for me, that's lack of direction. The no planning, I'm a little bit repeating myself, but I want to make this clear because I think for me these are the actual really key points in the whole discussion, the whole approach, that in worst case scenarios there is no real plan, that it wasn't discussed. And sometimes if this is not true for you, it could be that you have a strategy, a media strategy, or a strategy of dealing with information issues. Well, I would be interested to know how many of you have social media as a part of that strategy. In my experience, people are now trying, to some extent, to adjust their media strategies, if they have such, or information strategy, call it what you want, and adding on a bit which is including a social media. To me, that is fundamentally a patchwork thing, because it's taking what you already have and trying to add something onto it, rather than thinking of this as a shift in paradigm, a shift in the whole approach to information, the whole approach to communication, which as a school or an association, a study center, you could actually be conducting. I think it's fine to try and add it to your information strategy and information plan as an add-on, but I think you miss all the beauty and most of the possibilities with social media if you do it this way. Okay, last slide before I ask for your comments. No way to measure success. There are different aspects to this. One is that we got used to using tools like Google Analytics to check the number of visitors, the time they spent on the website, where they come from, what web browsers they are using, what language versions they are using, and so on. The same is not true for social media. It is such a fast-growing field of such a number of new tools that at least I haven't seen many people, organizations, who are consciously, concretely, and regularly collecting user data, statistics, input, either through questionnaires or through actual just log data. This is especially true for Facebook and the like, which is a running stream of issues. Now, I know that if you have a page up, you can use your insight to see the number of visitors and so on. But I wonder how many of us are actually following through on that, and how well we are connecting that with the traditional statistics that we are used to using. I know that statistics is not the only way to measure success, but it gives an indication, and we do need some sort of numerical data as well. It's not enough with a good feeling. We need to show some sort of feedback, one of which is statistics. Now, the other point I was mentioning a bit earlier was the targets. If we do not set ourselves targets, what we want to achieve with our information strategy or with our social media presence, there is no way to measure whether we are there or not. I will come back to that setting of targets a little bit later when I talk more concretely. So the third point is, even if we have statistics of usage we are looking at, even if we are set our targets, to what extent are we able to follow up on the targets we have set, to see whether they failed or not, and if they succeeded, why and how, what does it lead to? If they failed, what should we do about it? So, in brief, it's not enough to have targets. It's not enough to decide when it's a success, but it's also necessary to have a strategy to deal with the results of the statistics, regardless of whether they are positive or negative. We have to have a way to follow up on it and show the end users, if it's negative feedback, how we improve, and if it's positive feedback, show them the appreciation. Okay, that was the last of my short fire speech introduction in terms of what I see can be problems for many when they try to approach a thing like social media. And now I would ask if there are comments, feedback, and especially if you do not agree with me, or you have a good case example of how you did it with strategical thinking and setting targets and so on, which you would like to share with others.
Okay, please type your comments in the chat or raise your hand if you want to try the microphone.
So we have one comment earlier up in the chat from Louise saying that people do often have a social media strategy but doesn't count the cost of working in social media. I agree, and I will come back to that particular point a little bit later on. Anna is writing, we are writing a strategy which contains both content and how to behave. Okay, and that's interesting. And I agree. If I read you right, the one thing that is new is that social media is no longer one-way communication. If it ever was in any media, the idea is that it is two ways. But what is particular, and what I often get the question from people when I'm lecturing or discussing the issue, is do they have to be there as persons? Do they have to be there themselves? And my answer is no, you do not have to be there. Your employer cannot force you to be there as a person on, for example, Facebook. But if you are, you will get 10 times more responses than if you're not. Because Facebook and most social media, they are not business to business, they are not business to person, they are person to person. And that means both sides of the screen, there has to be somebody. Louise is saying, problem is that the leader of organizations are not getting the importance of social media. Yes, I completely agree. The problem is that this turns us, I think, who are working with it, to a kind of missionaries who are forced to speak about the benefits of this and try to sell it. And in doing so, we often overstep the mark, often exaggerate the importance of it, often play down the costs of it in order for our employers to allow us to work on this field, which gives us a very bad start. That is correct. You're both an employed and a person. Yes, and I don't think that we can or should force people to be social. That's fighting against the whole idea of social media. I do not know whether this is an age-related question, whether it is easier, as a rule, for younger people who have grown up with using a very lot of interactive media to lower the barriers and to be more present and do not have such concerns for privacy as other people are, or whether it's just a personal question, depending on your personality. Which way do you prefer to live? Susanne is writing, I think it's very important to have a line between me as a professional and me as a private person. Yes. And Christian writes, we always want to be in the front line. We do not dare to step back and make a strategic plan. Well, exactly. I think this is the problem. We have the feeling that it has to happen yesterday. And this sense of urge is, I think, very much pushed by the email society, in which you expect answers immediately. You expect things to happen right away. You do not want to wait. There is an expression about this generation. How is it again? Everything now, right away. Something like that. Torel says, we get new tools of information and communication. We still keep many of the old ones. I think this is the way to be. Yes, the new ones do not replace the old ones. I don't think so anymore. I think they complement. And then Thomas writes, and then I will go on to the next stage. We in our Denmark recently made a Facebook group. I think the reason why many companies do this without a lot of thinking and strategy at first is because the use of social media is still new to companies. Yes, I would say that it's very much the case. People are afraid that they will be left behind, so they rush aboard without thinking and without direction. And I think the thing is, if you want to succeed, you're going to have to pay the price sooner or later. You have to do this homework. You have to do this strategy. Otherwise, I think you will be running blind. Now, Turil, could you... No, I mean... Whoever is in charge... Sorry, not Turil. Whoever is in charge of the chat window being in the middle of the page, could you please move it down again? Thank you. And down away from the presentation, I will show the next slide. Ooh, wonderful. It just went there. Thank you, Roberto. So, what do? I think we need to turnaround. I think we need to invest in social media the same way we invest in everything else. It is not going to be cheap, and it's not going to be for free. Just because the tools are there, it doesn't mean that it's for free, because what costs money is our work time, our efforts, and to some extent some investment might have to be made in hardware for video cameras and so on. We have to get our decision makers, those who are in charge of the money strings, money purses, to be ready to invest and also to maintain. It's not a question of putting some money up front to somebody and then it's all done, but it's actually a running cost, especially in terms of time. And that seems to be one of the biggest problems, that we are all time optimists, or most of us are, and we think we can manage this across together with everything else. But I think we need to be more careful about not burning ourselves out too quickly if we are the fire souls. I think the turnaround is also about creating these measurables, goals and steps, and they are of two kinds to me. One is very concrete and a good start. I got some examples from a course I was running a couple of 2 months ago, where they said, we just set up a Facebook group. I'm just using Facebook as an example. I do not make Facebook equal with social media, but as most of us know Facebook, it's easy to use as an example. And they said, our first target is to get 5 likes on Facebook. When we have 5 likes, we will go to the next step. And I think it's really smart to break it down to such an extremely small and concrete step that is reachable, that you can actually measure and see. It doesn't have to be exactly 5 likes, but I think you get my point, my idea, that make the goals something that you can attain so that they are short-term, and then make big-term goals as well. Those ones who cannot be reached and not be measured so easily, but will result in more students coming in, for instance, or more interactivity if you are a teacher, based or counted in the number of people participating, or the number of texts they will write into whatever platform you're using. I think also we make the mistake that we're not including all in the process. If you use social media for marketing to try and attract more students to your school, then you have one approach. If you're a teacher, you have another approach. If you're the cleaner or the cook in the house, if you have a house, you have a completely other approach. I think, as with most change in behavior and change in our work mode, it's so important and difficult to include everybody of these. Also, actually, the bosses, those who decide, to make them part of the creative process. I think that is one way of including them and making them feel more engaged, and hopefully, well, I know this is not easy, I'm trying not to be too naive about this, but more engaged in feeling that this is something which is a joint process, something we are doing as a team, as a group together. And the fourth point here is, I think we should hurry slowly. There is no need to rush and do some patchwork, something poorly, which will then stay there for a long time. It's rather important to try and slow down. If you have something already, okay, fine, you have. It's hard to do something about that fact, but you might be able to include in the process a kind of breaks, a kind of ice in your hat. Slow down and think about it for a little bit, because what you're doing is you're building something to last. It doesn't mean that the page will look the same in 3 years' time, but it means that you have to lay the foundation. You have to think about it in the terms that you can build on it for a long time to come. Then it cannot be a patchwork. Then it cannot be without the goals, the measurable goals. It cannot be without investment. It cannot be without the feeling of joint ownership by everybody around you. Because if you're working alone, it's going to end there. It's going to start with you and it's going to stop with you. I think that's, to me, is very clear. So I think we should plan it as any other process of change. And we all know change is not easy. We all know that change is met with a lot of resistance by people because they are stressed that they will not manage, that they will be too stupid, that they will be too stressed, that it will be away from their other work. And we have to take that into consideration. We can't push people, we can't force them into, for instance, social media. It's like with any other process of change, you have to get people aboard and make them want to be part of it. You won't reach everybody, obviously. And it's no point in waiting for everybody to join before you actually get ahead, because sometimes, of course, it makes a lot of sense to start, and then by example, showing the good results of it, people will want to join. Again, not an easy process. I think what's important when we talk about social media is that we identify the new aspects, the ones that were not there before, the ones that actually change something. If we consider social media to be yet another output channel for materials that we are producing for other media already, or in other areas already, then we do not need to consider the new aspects. But if we want to make use of the possibilities, if we want to understand the deep changes that social media can bring to the way we communicate, then we have to look at the new aspects. I'll come back to them if time permits. I'll try to rush on because we're only on slide 9 out of I don't know how many. I think it's important you build on your own terms, that you not build on the terms of somebody else. And the somebody else in this case is very often Facebook, YouTube, Microsoft, the big providers, those who are doing the things, the tools that you're using. You should not let that rule you. I know this is difficult, but you should actually, it should be an aim to take control of the process and decide what makes most sense for you. And that you can do best if you understand and use the strengths of the new media and do not try to do everything with it, but rather focus on the issues that the new media gives as an added benefit. As you know, I think many of you know, for a long time when we talked about the web, we talked about the 3 C's. It used to be that content is king, meaning those who could make a homepage that had interesting, challenging, relevant, and regularly updated content would be the winners in the war of web users. And then came the big companies, and they started to market themselves on the web by online shops or by marketing commercials, ads, and then we got the consumer is king. After which came the era where people started to add their own content, and we got the community is king. And for a while it wasn't clear whether of any of these 3, or all of them, or none of them would be the final winner. Looking at social media, it's absolutely clear that it's the community that is the winner, because social media is all about user-generated content. It's no longer about us, me, producing almost anything except the platform, the setting, and being the present as a person myself, or as a professional if you choose. But it's all about the community. This is the first thing we have to understand, and it has a lot of implications for how we work with social media. The first and the most important thing to me is that for this to work we have to have trust. And trust is a tricky concept. It has many aspects, many layers. First, I would say that you dare trust yourself, that you trust that what you are, what you have, what you can offer is something other people will want. Sometimes I get the feeling that people in non-formal adult education, folkbildning, are running around with a poor self-image, being a little bit asking for forgiveness that they do what they do. That's not going to work. In social media, in the web, in public spaces, you have to dare to trust yourself that what you have to offer is something other people will want, and that what you have is good enough. Once you have managed to do that, you have to dare trust others. And this is really tricky if you are used to being a teacher, in control, so to speak, or whether you used to be an information officer, where you decide the message that you want to send out, and you decide how it's and when it's going to be sent out. This doesn't work in social media. You have to trust your audience. So you have to build a place, you have to build a space where you present what you have, and you're also ready and able to deal with the criticism that will come, with the critical questions, with the people heckling you. You can't hide in social media. You can hide on a web page. You can hide by disabling comments on your blog, but in social media, you can no longer hide. That's absolutely impossible. So you have to develop a strategy to be able to deal with what can be rather tricky, rather difficult results from this openness that social media will give. Now, that much said, at the same time, it also gives a lot of opportunities and possibilities, what we can call creative flow. My experience with social media and trying to offer things on social media, when it works, is that you have to be prepared to give a lot more of yourself, of your time, of your reflections, and be much more open with the information. Sometimes I have the problem in my association and for myself that I want to keep the information to myself until it's completely ready. I want to not present something which is half done. I'm afraid that people will laugh at me. I'm afraid that they will see that what I have to propose is stupid. While it is true that we do not need to bare ourselves completely in front of others in order to get their attention and trust, it's also true that we have to give them something. We have to dare to be there, risking making mistakes. And people will appreciate that. Most people will see that. It's also a license to be creative. Using social media is a license to do things about your work and about the things you believe in, which previously wasn't really something you were supposed to do. You were supposed to be rather professional. In my case, it meant being a bit detached, taking a bit of a distance to the issue itself. In social media, you can forget about that. You can let it rip. You let out the plugs, and what you will find is that you get a lot of response from people who are actually just waiting for this. It is an emotional medium more than a factual medium. So, if you dare to be open and you dare to share, you get the feeling and the sense of shared joy. And when you're doing this, I think that the strategy must also include an aspect of thinking ahead, not just doing it for today, not just doing it for this week, not just thinking of it in terms of deadlines, but to think much bigger than that, to think about this as a way that you are changing your approach to your communication with, be it your students or prospective students, those who might come to your class or to your school or to your institution or to your study circle, that you have a long-term approach, like with the small goals and the big goals. You have the aspects of living in the here and now with this, but you also have the approach that this is going somewhere. This has a direction. I think the sense of direction is very much needed in order for us to keep finding the energy to put in, which is needed to create a meaningful social media experience for people. So you need to think big, but that shouldn't stop you from acting. I said earlier that we act too quickly, and that's true. But I would also say that procrastinating, that means burying yourself in target group research, questionnaires, planning forever, is going to kill some of the joy of the whole thing. So ideally, we would have some sort of test beds. In real life, in my experience, we do not have the time to test this out in a safe, protected environment. We have to do it as we go along. I think this is going to be the case for a long time. I think we just have to deal with that. We have to try and figure out a way to be flexible in terms of approaching new items and new issues, but maintaining the strategy, the bigger thinking, why we're doing this, as a kind of backdrop, so that even if we are not always fully in control of the things, and with social media you are not in control, we still don't do it just following the stream. We have a sense of direction and an idea where we want to take this. We're just not really sure of how this journey will develop, also because much of it will be about creating a space for end users, students and others, to build their own reality with our help. And that means one thing in traditional classic information strategy is that we think about the image we provide. We think about how we are being seen, but very much out of the structure of ourselves. We are very self-centered as associations or schools, in my experience, and we are proud to present the way we are organized and the way we have an organigram of our structure, not taking into the account that end users don't really care. One thing that would benefit us when we evaluate the strategies and the implementation of the way we behave in social media is if we were to be able to see through the eyes of the end users, if we could see how they perceive us. One way of doing this, which I usually suggest to students when I'm teaching this, is to analyze others who are doing something similar. It's very simple. It's nothing strange with it, but especially going to a field which is not your own. So don't stay within education, go to sports, go to somewhere else and see, because then you don't have your own image of what it should be like. You don't have your own opinion of the contents. You can just basically see on how are they doing the structures, how are they approaching these issues from a more analytical point of view. This is not an easy point, but nevertheless I think it's very important. Then when it comes to being online, to be social, I think we have to accept the fact that people will not come to us. We have to go to people. And that means we have to have a video channel on YouTube or Vimeo or Dailymotion or whichever video service you find is the best one. But it's not enough that you send out your videos there. No, I think you also need to be present in the community, to watch other people's videos, make them favorites, comment, ask, make video responses. That way you interact with other people who are working with video, and you will get visitors coming to see what you're all about. Now, this doesn't make sense to all of you. If you're a teacher, you're more focused, I suppose, on your group and the teaching you're doing and how to make that work. Now, but if you're anything else, information officer, marketing responsible, or wanting to develop the strategy for your whole school, then this is very important. The same is true for blogs. I think we shouldn't kill off the blogs yet. I think they have a brilliant future when people want something more reflective, slower, a bit longer than Facebook or Twitter status updates. And there as well, I think it's very important to go and comment others and not just write your own blog as if that's the only thing, but link to other blogs, read other blogs, comment on other blogs is a good way of getting readers to your blog. Facebook comments, again the example with Facebook. If you're there and if you see something you like, if you comment on it, people will appreciate it. They will see it and they will see you. So that's a better way to me than paying for a Facebook ad, which isn't expensive, but the comments is a much more direct way. Photos, make yourself visible. Again, we can't force people to be online as themselves. That's true. But the experience shows that if you show yourself by photos on your page, by adding photo streams, not necessarily through Facebook if you're concerned with privacy. You can put them on any other video service or photo service where you retain all your rights. But showing photos is also it's also clearly an indication that social media isn't only about written text or videos. If you can't afford or don't know how to make videos, photo streams is a very good way of starting making visible some of the things that you're talking about, and people will like it. When making a strategy for social media and for marketing, I think honesty is the base for trust. So you should avoid to market yourself as the coolest, hippest, bounciest, gayest institution in the world if that is not reflected in what you're actually offering. People will notice. And then if you lose your social credibility, I think you'll be pretty dead for quite some time in the social network field. People will spread the word very quickly. Remember, this is a person-to-person area we are talking about. So damage control is very hard. You have to consider the messages you're sending out and how you're sending them out, because they will remain and they will come back to haunt you. So you have better be prepared to stand up for it and say, yes, that's true, I stand for this. This is actually something we believe in, and this is who we are. The second thing with honesty for me is I don't think it makes a lot of sense to outsource social media content, production, or strategies to professionals, because they will do a good job, but they might even get some heart into it, but it's still in the end about you and your institution or your school or your class. So I think even if it's a tougher job, it's better to do it yourself, prepare to make mistakes, because we will all make mistakes, and then do it again. Learning from it, learning by doing, as we often say, rather than trying to buy a ready-made package, because, well, you might disagree with me, but I do not believe that to work. I'll push on here and then we can have a discussion. Shortly, some rules. You need to be, in order for you to be able to make a good strategy, you need to know yourself and you need to know your audience. Oops, that was too quick. Knowing yourself means who are you as an association, a school, a class. Knowing your audience means who are they. Well, actually, I think it's coming. Just hang on. I think this is coming in the next couple of slides. Let's have a look. Just a second. Yes, it will come. Seems I put the last slides in a funny order, so I'll try to accommodate for that. Recipe for success, and I will come back to the who am I and who are you and know yourself. But the recipe for successful strategy making and successful marketing and successful presence in social media is visibility, which you will get by being present, commenting on others, joining Facebook threads, adding hashtags to Twitter. That will raise your visibility and that will attract attention to you. Memory glue, that's tricky because that's personality. We need to get something that we used to when we were creating websites, talk about sticky websites or stickiness, something that stuck to you, that once you make to come back. This is incredibly and increasingly difficult in the time of the fast social media, because there are so many things that are attracting attention. What can we do to stick out from the crowd? Memory glue needs to be that little extra. That's something that will make people remember you or the message you want to give across, and what make them want to come back. For many, a memory glue is typically a quiz show, a question, a game where you can win something. Recently, we've been looking into FBML. I don't know if you know the concept. Facebook markup language. The possibility through Facebook to create small applications that can be more interactive, that can add some things on your page which nobody else or very few others will have. A recipe for success is also the creation of a relationship. If you manage to find a personal voice in your messages, in your way of being present online, and you're generous with yourself, then people will recognize that as a genuine thing. They will see that it's not just marketing, you're also engaging with them, with other people, and that creates a relationship. This relationship, together with the memory glue and your visibility, will increase the usefulness of social media for almost anything you want to do. The spices you can use when you're cooking this recipe, which is the strategy, is, for instance, humor. That's a tricky one because humor is not the same for everybody. What you say might turn against you. But nevertheless, successful humor is one of the better ways. When you get people to smile, they will remember you. It's very simple. Self-irony, really tricky. Some of us work with non-formal adult education, which has a very low recognition in general public, and people, if they know anything, they might have prejudice against this is a club for old ladies sitting there and, jag vet inte vad virka heter på engelska, but knitting and talking about something, never learning anything. And if you're able to turn that into your advantage by showing that that's a part of the truth, but it's also something else, showing that you're generous with yourself, that you can laugh at yourself with the prejudice people might have about you, that might work wonders for creating a presence which is a bit different, a bit quirky, a bit more personal. Use of styles, what I mean is simply we don't always have to write in the same factual, formal, stylistic manner by which we are making our press releases if we are information officers. We can also try to write blogs as if they were diaries. One example is when I had a group in Finland 2 months ago, I asked them to describe their institution as if it was a human. So, hello, I am Arbis, I am 93 years old, these are my hobbies, and this is what I like to do. So making an institution human flesh, and then trying to think what can you do with that. That's a kind of style approach, that you're kind of entering into a stylistic genre or a literary genre, a kind of game. If it works, people will like it. Again, it's not easy. The devil's advocate. Well, there will always be people who don't like you and who do not like what you do or how you do it. And the best way to deal with that, I think, is to have somebody put on the black hat while in development or while you're looking at your pages and being that critical person, trying to find all the faults and flaws, what you shouldn't do and how this looks awful and how it can be read in the wrong way, and then see if you can find approaches to deal with that, if you can find arguments against that. Obnoxious behavior I will not go into because I would like to give some time at the end for discussions as well. The final slides. The who am I? I will make this presentation available if any of you are interested afterwards, so that we have some time, some minutes in the end for discussion. Where do I come from? How do I think? What do I want? And what do I have to offer? Now, this can work both for you as a person, but also for you as an institution. It's not limited to the person aspect, even if it's written in the I am form. The same questions can be asked and should be able to be answered by an institution as well. And then obviously the next one is, who are you? The end user, the one I want to reach with this strategy of mine. What is it you want? How often do we, making a strategy, think about the end user's wants and needs? I would say too seldom. I would say we too often build it based on our earlier experience, what we are doing, what we are offering, what we think people want and need, but we do not turn it around, so keep it in mind. Social media, in essence, can be put into 3 statements. There is a me present, there is a you present, and this creates, when it works, an us. And we have to be able to deal with all 3 aspects, to find out the level to which we are prepared to go as persons, ourselves, how we can meet, understand the you, and what the us can add to the work we are doing. Because then we are ready to go into the cloud. And cloud computing is for sure here to stay. Today we have Facebook, Google, Ning, Bambuser, Pearl Trees, YouTube, and I can name a lot of other brand names and so on, but you get the general idea. What I think is important is that we do not build a strategy to deal with Facebook. because Facebook will come and go. It will disappear, become something else. What we need to do is we need to build a strategy for social media and then apply it to Facebook as long as we are in Facebook, and then apply it to whatever comes after once that comes, so that we are not stuck with all our eggs in one basket, and when somebody goes away with the basket, we're just lost. So that's why I say we need not a patchwork, but we need a bit more strategic planning. We need to think about the bigger picture. Now I feel I should stop this, and we could put up the chat window to large again. I won't show any more slides now, and let's see about the discussions at the end. I'm sorry we only have 2 minutes, but perhaps we can go a few minutes over time in case the discussion starts going. I got so involved and engaged that time just ran away. I'm sorry for that. Let's see. Louise says young people don't have more skill, but they have a lot of practice. Yeah, probably true. I agree. Christian writes, working with social media has to be something different than one-way communication. Focus is on sharing. You will have other people not as recipients, but as partners. Isn't that the same method as in popular education, folkbildning? Christian, I agree with you. I think this is the point. A good adult educator is somebody who can engage the audience, can find a connection with the audience, the group, and can make the group work together to become a larger part than the sum of its parts. That the whole thing is much bigger than any one adult educator can ever be. Now, social media is exactly the same thing. It's multiplying. If you succeed, you will have the best advocates for your thinking, for what you want to approach and what you want to reach in your work. If you manage to get the people within social media who are users on your side, they will be the best advocates. They will, by word of mouth, say, that was a good course, and this is an interesting concept, and that's really something I'd like to share, and this is important. We have all that in adult education. We have all the content, but we are a bit poor in marketing it or making it visible, and we are a bit clumsy when it comes to reaching people also in the new social media. We had this, to my mind, in my opinion, we had this problem already before social media, so it's nothing new in itself. It's only that with social media we now have the opportunity to reach a much wider audience, and using some of the specialities that we have, being engaged, engaging, personal, enthusiastic, and knowledgeable, we can attract people's attention into what we think is important. A related point is we don't ordinarily do our jobs as private individuals, whereas social media appears to have the prerequisite. Maintaining what appears to be called professional distance is made very hard. Yes, and again, I would repeat what I've said twice already today. Those who succeed, who are successful in creating social media strategies, they are the ones who decide to go there as persons, to be there as persons. It doesn't mean you have to be there with your face or your name. You can nowadays, if you create, again, a Facebook page, you can use the web as that Facebook page. The trick is, when you write a status update, you don't write it from the point of view of, today you can apply for a new course starting at 5 o'clock, welcome. But you use the personal I or we, or today at the office this happened. This is the advice I give many people on the trainings that I do on being in social media and working with social media. Try to see whether it works for you, that you give a face, a name, and a feeling to the school you're working for without having to be there with your own name. Is it recommendable to have a working profile next to your private one? No, Martin, you do not need to have a working profile. Nowadays, when you create a page in Facebook, you can use Facebook, if you would talk only about Facebook, as that page. In your profile, you simply go switch to page, use as page, använd som sida, after which you will write in the name of the institution, and the photo will be from the institution Facebook page and not your own. And then Louise writes, everyone knows that you don't put private stuff on social media. I might tell people that I had a nice wine night, but not that I had a fight. Yes, Louise, this is the point. Personal and private are two different things. You can be personal in terms of sharing some things, but you don't need to be private. That fighting at home is a good example. There's lots of other examples which I think there are lines we shouldn't necessarily cross because they will not benefit anybody. So it's not about spilling your guts about your life sorrows. It's easier than that. You know, the most comments people get, associations and schools get on their Facebook pages is usually when somebody writes, oh damn, the coffee is out in the coffee room and who stole the last piece of bulle from the kitchen. And a lot of people will sympathize with that. Whereas if you write, my husband beat me up last night, and nobody's going to reply to that, well, very few anyway, and it's not going to serve any purpose. If you write as the institution, would you still write I and Maria, or instead as we and Fof? I would write we and Fof. I wouldn't use names necessarily, but I do know some people who are. They are sharing responsibility for updating blogs and Facebook pages, and they take turns. So they will be, today is me, Maria, and blah, 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 and this is what I did today, and this is what we do today, and I had this thought when my boss came in the door. But they keep it on a kind of funny note. They are not too personal, and that way it works. Okay. Robertus, shall we slowly wind this up? I see that there are still some discussions, and I think there might be lots of comments up there which I haven't had time to look at when I was talking, but nevertheless, it's now 3:05 Finnish time, 2:05 Nordic time, so we have been at this for exactly 1 hour. You think we should wrap it up slowly?
Yes, I do. Yes.
That's what I was guessing. Okay. I would like to mention that we have the Ning service up for the distance network, which anybody is free and invited to join, and the discussion can very well go on there. There is a group for this webinar, social media and strategy, which we set up in advance to see if we could discuss in advance some of the questions about making a strategy. If you wish, we could upload the PowerPoint that was used here, which is nothing, you know, secret or very difficult. It's just some thoughts collected. And if you have issues, questions, and suggestions to go on with this work, we might consider doing that in the Ning.
I also would like to remind you that this webinar was recorded, and you can access the recording from the webinar from both Distance homepage and your wiki.
Yes, exactly. You see now in the chat the link to the Surviving Social Media Strategy page. There was a question from Barfus Ruge about whether there are any examples of these strategies. I don't have any ready examples of strategies in my computer. I have heard that there are such being made. I would invite all of us to look up whether we can find some in our association or in our surroundings, and then publish them if they are official or publishable into the joint Ning network, because I think we might benefit from seeing how it's actually done, what kind of terminology is used, and what arguments can be used in order to convince decision makers and those with the money that this is an important aspect that we should be dealing with. The seminar in June, just to make sure, is that on June 8 or is it on June 18? It's on June 18, isn't it?
On June 8th.
June 8, okay. Fine, so we need to get that information out to those who are not present today as well, that June 8 is the last seminar before the summer break within this webinar series. And I guess most likely the series will continue this autumn, yes?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Johanni, I'm back now. I hope you can hear me. And thank you very much for your input, and to everybody else, thank you for your lively discussion. And I must stress what Johanni has been talking about. Please do check out our page on our wiki. I put it in there. Here it comes again, and be part of the discussion further. And the recording will be available on this link as well. So, Johanni and all of you others, thanks for being with us, and we hope to meet many of you again on the 8th of June. Thanks for now, and until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all. From a Finland that is world champions in ice hockey. Ha ha.
Okay, good for you. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Yes. Bye-bye.